Hello, my name is Robert, and this is my channel. I also sometimes go by Athos on some of my uh, game platforms and such, but this YouTube channel, I've had it up for a couple of years now, and I think I went about 3 years with only 2 videos ever getting uploaded. I would like to change that and begin posting more consistently. I am an aspiring voiceover artist, as well as a huge lifelong history nerd, comic book nerd, and gaming nerd. So I would like to use this channel as a way to practice recording and to just put out some fun content that I enjoy making and that hopefully somebody will enjoy listening to or watching. So here are the plans for this channel. And yes, I intentionally chose a scene from the Fellowship of the Rings movie for the background art for this, because this is the start of a new adventure for me. I'd like to start by setting up a little structure. I would like to create a series of series focused on different topics that I'm a huge fan of. First up, I'd like to make a series of reviews and lore videos about my favorite tabletop role-playing games. Then I'd like to also make some series about character builds, using those role-playing game systems to create mechanical representations of my favorite movie, novel, and comic book characters. Now, the Cosmere novels are some of my favorite books these days, and I would love to do some deep dives into the Cosmere, the novels, the upcoming RPG. And I know that all of these different topics have quite a range of other YouTube artists that are putting content up there for that, but quite frankly, they've inspired me, and I want to try my hand at it as well. Also, as I mentioned, as an aspiring voiceover person, I'd love to just practice reading things. So I know my first few videos were recordings of me reading one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes short stories, and recently I've started making some recordings of Shakespeare's King Lear at a friend's request. But I'd like to keep going and see what I can do. Also, I'm a huge history nerd that loves talking about history, legends, and world mythologies, so I'd love to keep going with that as well. Tabletop role-playing games, or TTRPGs. I know everyone's go-to there is Dungeons & Dragons, which that's the one I've been playing the most over the years. I'd love to talk about its history and the different mechanics between the different editions. Everyday Heroes is a new favorite, heavily linked to Dungeons & Dragons in history and basic mechanics. I'd love to talk about this system as well as the various cinematic adventure supplements that have been created for it. Now, that said, I also speak on a podcast from time to time about this game. I will be, once I figure out how to do it, I will be putting the link to it in the description of this video. That podcast, by the way, does have a YouTube channel. It's Redemption HQ with 3 of my buddies. And again, that will be in the description. The Seventh Sea role-playing game, which is a great mashup of genres for swashbuckling adventure and magic, so Three Musketeers meets Lord of the Rings. There have been 2 editions of that. I'd love to talk about how the mechanics are different from each edition. I'd love to talk about the lore, because the lore is amazing in this world, but the lore changes from 1st to 2nd edition. They become very different worlds in some respects. And I did have a small part to play in the 2nd edition creation. Legends of the Five Rings, another fantastic setting that focuses rather than on European-based mythology and fantasy. This one is heavily inspired by the mythology and legends of Japan. And it's also gone through a lot of editions, as well as a D20 Dungeons & Dragons based book that's come out pretty recently. I'd like to take a look at particularly at the most recent edition of the game, as well as the more recent D20 Adventures in Rokugan game. The Deadlands is another awesome genre mashup. I believe it's referred to as Weird West, a combination of horror and fantasy adventure in the Wild West. A lot of fun there. There have been several different editions of this to date, and the lore and the mechanics are fascinating. The Chronicles of Darkness 2nd edition is the most up-to-date edition of this reboot of the World of Darkness setting. And This really is a fantastic urban fantasy, urban horror game, and I'd love to talk about the different types of creatures you can play or splats. I'd love to talk about the basic mechanics and what things changed between first and second edition of this setting. Now, the World of Darkness is the original urban horror fantasy game for many. This got started in the 90s, and it's gone through multiple editions. Right now, the World of Darkness games are currently in a 5th edition, not to be confused with the 5th edition of Legends of the Five Rings or the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. The Trinity Continuum games are a fantastic, multiversal setting, if Marvel fans will get that reference. And it's being produced by Onyx Path Games, much as the Onyx Path Game Group also produced a lot of the Chronicles of Darkness and more recent World of Darkness books before the 5th edition. Scion is another Onyx Path game line, which is, imagine Percy Jackson meets Dungeons & Dragons, and that's what you basically have here. Lots of fun mechanics, great lore, and a good look at world mythologies. And Liminal. Liminal is a relatively new game. It is an urban fantasy game created by a wonderful group of folks back in England. And this has a completely different system than either the storyteller / story path system of the Onyx Path and World of Darkness games, or the roll and keep system that you'd find in Legends of the Five Rings or 7th Sea, or even the D20 based stuff that you'd find in Dungeons & Dragons and Everyday Heroes, and to an extent Deadlands as well. Very different game, very different rules, but a lot of fun and a very interesting take. Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere is a fantastic series of books. Now, technically speaking, it's a series of series. The first big series to be published was Mistborn. 7 books coming out in there across 2 different eras of time. A new era or trilogy of books is being created as we speak. I would love to talk about the novels. I would love to talk about the lore. I would love to talk about, after it's released next year, the role-playing game that Brandon Sanderson's Dragonsteel Entertainment Company and Brotherwise Games are creating. The Stormlight Archive is the second big series of books created in this shared universe. I'd love to talk about the novels there, the big lore there, and after it's released this summer, in the later part of July, I'd love to talk about the Stormlight tabletop RPG games. And yes, the Mistborn and Stormlight games share a single system. They're actually meant to be a series of tabletop game setting rule books for players and game masters. So lots of chance to deep dive into even more lore of the Cosmere through those books and releases, because it's been said brand new lore will be revealed in these game books. Brandon Sanderson and his team are working very closely with the wonderful people at Brotherwise to make this whole series of tabletop games book accurate and also just fantastic for increasing our knowledge of this fictional universe. Elantris is so far a standalone novel, but 2 sequels are going to be written over the course of the next few years, and it's also been said that there will be a tabletop book for that as well in this Cosmere game series. Would love to talk about the lore of this incredibly fascinating and crazy world and all of its many, many magic systems. Warbreaker is a standalone novel at present, although there has been some talk of a sequel over the years. It's been said that there will also be a tabletop book for this setting as well. And in general, lore of the Cosmere as a whole, or World Hopper lore as I want to call it, is something I want to dive in as well. And of course, there is going to be, as with the other 4 bullet points, a tabletop game book for the Cosmere as a whole, for things that don't necessarily fall into the Mistborn, Stormlight, Elantris, or Warbreaker settings. And boy, is there a lot of lore in the Cosmere. One of my favorite YouTube video things to watch, and ever since I started getting into YouTube, is character builds. I love seeing how different people interpret my favorite characters from comics or films or novels, and how they adapt those characters and their abilities to different game systems. So, starting with the Marvel Cinematic Universe characters, I would love to use the Everyday Hero system and the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And now we can, when I say 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, we can be talking about either the 2014 or the 2024/25 books that have been coming out. And I would like to do the same thing with the DC comic book movies, the DCEU, with those same systems. As I mentioned in the Cosmere slide, I would love to be talking about my favorite Cosmere characters from the novels and how I would build them. And two of my favorite TV shows from the last decade have been Leverage and Person of Interest. Fantastic modern-day heist, intrigue, and adventure stories, which are perfect for the Everyday Heroes game setting. Another one of my favorite shows from the past decade or so has been Supernatural. Dean and Sam Winchester and all the gang, and again, with that big modern-day fantastic setting, I think that these characters would be perfect for the Everyday Heroes game rules, as well as for the Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition for World of Darkness 5e, and for, well, quite frankly, Hunter the Vigil 2nd edition from Chronicles of Darkness. So I'd love to try and adapt them to all these different systems. I know I've said this several times already, but I am an aspiring voiceover artist, and I would love to practice my voiceover work with you guys. I've already been asked to read a Shakespeare play, and I just love Sherlock Holmes and Shakespeare anyway, so I'm planning on doing several short stories from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's canon and from various plays from Shakespeare or poems from Shakespeare. Also a big fan of John Donne, so getting some of John Donne's poems in there would be fantastic. I would love to share some prayers from both my tradition and other beautiful prayers and thoughts from other cultures as well, if I can. So the Rosary, the St. Michael prayer, St. Benedict's prayer, lots of options there I'm thinking of. And one thing I did over the pandemic was record some chapters of storybooks for my little nephews and nieces and my goddaughter. So I'd like to perhaps get back to doing that and do some audio recordings of different things like The Hobbit or The Christmas Carol or Pride and Prejudice, things like that. I am a massive history nerd. I love reading and sharing stories about history, about world legends and mythologies. So I'd love to take a look at the rise of river civilizations and empires of the ancient world, the classical era, which brings us Greece and Rome, Persia, Maurya India, Han China, the medieval period that brings us the Crusades as Western Christendom and Islam interact explosively, the rise of the shogunate in Japan, the Mali Empire of North Africa, the Aztecs starting to form at the tail end of the medieval period over in Mexico, and the early modern period with its gunpowder empires and global exploration and expansion, and of course the modern era with the world wars and the Cold War. And by the way, this is not a prohibitive list. Just because something's not up here does not mean I'm not going to talk about it. These are just the things that came to my head when I was making this particular video. And the same goes for this list of various cultural legends and mythology sections. Yes, I will definitely want to talk about Celtic legends and mythology, and Arthurian legend is both a part of Celtic legend as well as its own unique corpus of legends in my thought process, at least. Chinese legends, Egyptian legends, Greek and Roman mythologies. They're incredibly similar with name swaps, but there are some unique legends to both. Japanese mythology and legends, Norse mythology and legends, and any others that happen to come across my eye. So these are my plans for this channel, and we'll see if I'll be able to keep up with this resolve to post more regularly and with this wide range of content. Thank you all for listening, and for anyone that's out there that would be interested in these topics, I hope you'll give my channel a try. And now that I'm making more regular YouTube content, I suppose I should end with the request of please like and subscribe. And I hope to be posting again for you all soon. Take care.